In February 2024, Shaquille O'Neal quietly slipped out of the public eye, boarded a flight to Newark, New Jersey, and went looking for someone most people have never heard of. Not a business partner, not a teammate, not anyone connected to championships or cameras or the enormous noise of the life he had built. A girl he had known for 2 years when he was 9 years old. A girl who had done one small thing on a blacktop in 1981 that cost her nothing and took less than 60 seconds. And that Shaq had been carrying inside him, quietly, for 42 years. He found her. And what he gave her when he did is one of the most quietly beautiful things a famous person has ever done, for someone the world never knew existed. But here is what the headlines missed entirely. The gift was not the scholarship, though that changed everything. It was not the program with her name on it, though that will outlast all of us. It was not the foundation money, or the framed photograph, or any of the things that arrived with a bow on them. The real gift was something he had been carrying in a coat pocket on Bergen Street the day he left Newark as a 10-year-old boy in the back of a car. Something small and brown and paper-covered, with her handwriting on the front and 42 years of his handwriting hidden inside. Something she had forgotten she gave him. Something he had never once put down. To understand what it meant, you have to go back. All the way back to a cracked blacktop behind a Newark school in 1979, to a boy nobody believed in yet and the girl who already did. The radiator in apartment 4B on Bergen Street knocked every night at 11 o'clock. Not a gentle knock. A hard, metal, I am not finished talking knock that rattled the pipes inside the wall and shook the small framed picture of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. that Lucille O'Neal had hung above the kitchen doorway with a single nail and a prayer that it would stay up. It always stayed up. 7-year-old Shaquille O'Neal had learned to sleep through the knocking. He had learned to sleep through a lot of things in Newark. The sirens 2 blocks over on Springfield Avenue. The arguments from the apartment above them where Mr. and Mrs. Caruso went at it every Friday like it was their job. The distant sound of bottles breaking on the concrete behind the bodega on the corner, where the older boys gathered after dark and did the things older boys did when nobody was watching them closely enough. Shaq slept through all of it, but tonight he was not sleeping. He was sitting up in his bed with his knees pulled to his chest, taking up nearly the entire twin mattress, his feet already hanging off the end even at 7 years old. He was looking at the wall. On the wall, his mother had taped a picture she had torn carefully from a magazine. A basketball player, mid-air. The ball leaving his fingertips like it had somewhere important to be. Shaq looked at that picture every night. He looked at it the way other kids looked at candy store windows. Newark in 1979 was not the city it would eventually become. It was still bleeding from what had happened in the summer of 1967, the 6 days of uprising that left 26 people dead, over 700 injured, and whole blocks of the city looking like something had chewed them up and spat them out. 12 years had passed since then, but on Bergen Street you could still feel it. Boarded windows that never got unboarded. Empty lots where buildings used to stand. Full now of broken glass and tall weeds that pushed up through the concrete like they were trying to prove something. The city was poor in the specific way that American cities get poor, not slowly and quietly but loudly and all at once like someone had pulled a plug. Factories closed, jobs left. The people who had money moved out to the suburbs, taking their tax dollars with them, and what stayed behind was everything else. The people who loved Newark too much or were too poor to leave, and the children those people raised, and the schools those children attended with leaking roofs and textbooks from 1968, and teachers who stayed not because the pay was good. It was not, but because somebody had to. Lucille O'Neal was not a woman who complained about any of this. She worked. She loved her son. She kept the apartment clean, and the refrigerator as full as she could manage, and the picture of Dr. King straight on the wall. She sang when she cooked, not performing, just singing, the way some people hum without realizing it. Gospel songs mostly, sometimes Aretha. Shaq would lie in his bed and listen to his mother, sing in the kitchen, and feel safe in a way that he could not have explained to anyone. But he knew, even at 7, that safe inside the apartment and safe outside the apartment were 2 different things. Outside was different. Outside, the first thing people noticed about Shaquille O'Neal was that he was enormous. Not just tall for his age enormous, wrong grade enormous. First time you see him you do a double take enormous. His 3rd grade teacher, a tired woman named Mrs. Phyllis Garraway, who had been teaching at Chancellor Avenue School for 19 years and believed she had seen everything, stopped cold on the first day of class when Shaq walked through the door and said out loud before she could stop herself, "Lord." Shaq had heard that before. He would hear it many more times. Being the biggest kid in school sounds from the outside like a good problem to have. It is not. It is a specific kind of loneliness. You don't fit in desks. You knock over chairs by simply walking past them. You stand in line, and you are a head taller than everyone around you. And that head might as well be a lighthouse. It tells everyone exactly where you are at all times. And children, when they find something different about you, use it. Bigfoot, Jolly Green, Sasquatch, your mama need a forklift to pick you up. Shaq learned to laugh it off before he learned to tie his shoes correctly. He performed not caring so well and for so long that it started to feel almost like the real thing. He would grin when they said it. Clap back with a joke of his own. Make them laugh before they could make him hurt. But Mrs. Garraway, exhausted, seen it all, Mrs. Garraway, watched him do this trick one afternoon when a group of fourth graders cornered him near the water fountain, and she saw what was underneath the grin. She had been teaching long enough to know the difference between a child who is fine and a child who has decided to pretend to be fine. Those are not the same child. She didn't say anything to him about it. What could she say? She was one woman with 28 students and a classroom with a ceiling tile that dripped when it rained. But she started keeping an eye on him. The blacktop behind Chancellor Avenue School was not much. A square of cracked asphalt, roughly half a basketball court in size, with a single hoop at one end. The pole holding the hoop up was rusted from the base to about 4 feet high, the kind of rust that looks permanent, like it has earned its place. The backboard was plywood, not glass, with a crack across the lower right corner that had been there so long it felt intentional. The net was long gone, had probably been gone since the Carter administration. But the hoop was there, and the blacktop was there. And every afternoon after school, kids from the neighborhood filtered through the chain-link gate and filled it up with noise. This was where Shaq came alive. It was not immediate. He was not, at 7 and 8 years old, the player he would become. He was clumsy in the way large children are clumsy when their bodies are growing faster than their coordination can keep up with. He traveled constantly. He bumped into people. He lost the ball off his own foot on a clear path to the hoop. But he kept coming back. Every single day he came back. There was something about the blacktop that felt different from every other place in his life. In the classroom he was too big. In the hallway he was in the way. Even at home, in the apartment, he had to be careful. Careful not to knock Mama's good cups off the shelf with his elbow. Careful not to block the whole doorway when relatives came over. Careful, careful, careful. On the blacktop, he didn't have to be careful. He could be exactly as big as he was. He was 9 years old when he first noticed her. She was sitting on the low concrete bench along the fence that ran the left side of the blacktop. 2 braids, one on each side, with white barrette clips shaped like small daisies. A red coat, slightly too big, the kind bought one size up so it would last 2 winters. She had a library book open in her lap, something with a blue cover. But she wasn't reading it. She was watching the game. Not watching the way people watch when they want to be entertained. Not watching for the funny moments or the arguments about who fouled who. She was watching like she was studying it. Shaq noticed her noticing, which was different from being noticed. He went back to the game. That afternoon, 3 older boys from the 5th grade, Marcus Webb, Darnell Price, and a heavy-set kid everyone called Cheese, whose real name Shaq never learned, were on the court. They were 10 and 11, which to a 9-year-old might as well be grown. They played rough and called their own fouls and argued every call in the specific theatrical way of boys who have learned that arguing loudly is sometimes as effective as being right. Shaq missed 3 shots in a row. They weren't bad shots. The first one hit the back of the rim hard. The second rattled in and out. Bad luck, not bad aim. The third he rushed. Marcus Webb laughed. Not a friendly laugh. Man, what is wrong with you? You the size of a building, and you still can't put it in. How you that big and that bad? Darnell Price added something. Cheese added something. The specific words blurred together into the usual shape of that kind of noise. Designed not to hurt a specific thing, but to hurt everything in general. Shaq kept his face still. He had practiced this. He started assembling the grin. Then a voice from the bench, clear and completely unbothered, said, "He's still better than all y'all put together." Everyone looked. The girl with the 2 braids had her library book closed. She was looking directly at Marcus Webb with an expression that could only be described as "I said what I said." Marcus Webb was 10 years old and not accustomed to being contradicted by a 9-year-old girl on a park bench. He opened his mouth. She looked at him without blinking once. He closed his mouth. She picked up the basketball from where it had rolled to the edge of the court. She walked across the blacktop to where Shaq was standing, held the ball out to him with both hands, and said quietly, "Just for him, shoot it again." He took the ball. He looked at the hoop. He shot it. It went in clean, no rim, no rattle. She walked back to her bench, opened her blue library book, and continued not reading it. Shaq looked at the back of her head for a moment. Then he looked at Marcus Webb, who had suddenly found the sky very interesting. Shaq picked up the ball again. From that afternoon, everything was different, though he was 9 years old and did not have the words for different yet. Only the feeling of it, warm and specific, settled somewhere in his chest like something that had found the right place to be. Her name, he found out the next day, was Valeria Simmons. She lived on Avon Avenue, 3 blocks over, with her grandmother, Miss Dottie, who grew tomatoes in coffee cans on the fire escape and called everyone baby, and made sweet potato pie at Thanksgiving that people talked about for the other 11 months of the year. Valeria was in the 3rd grade too, different class, same school. She had been watching the blacktop games for 2 weeks before she said anything. She had, she told him later, been waiting to see if he was the kind of boy who gave up or the kind who kept going. "You kept going," she said, simply, "so I figured you were worth talking to." It was the most serious thing anyone had ever said to Shaq in his 9 years of life, and he had no answer for it at all. He just nodded. She seemed satisfied with that. They walked home in the same direction for 3 blocks before her street split off from his. Neither of them said much. It was the comfortable kind of quiet that usually takes years to build between people, but sometimes, rarely, arrives all at once, like it had been there before the people found it, just waiting. When they reached the corner of Avon Avenue, Valeria turned left. "See you tomorrow," she said, without looking back. Shaq watched her walk down Avon Avenue in the big red coat. "Yeah," he said, though she was probably already too far to hear it. He walked the rest of the way home alone. He didn't look at anything along the way, not the boarded windows, not the broken glass behind the bodega, not the rust on the stop sign at the corner of Bergen and 17th that had been rust for as long as he could remember. He just walked. For the first time in a long time, he felt exactly the right size. The year Shaq turned 8, he grew 2 inches in 4 months. Lucille marked it on the door frame of the kitchen the way mothers do, a small pencil line, the date written beside it in her careful handwriting. She stepped back, looked at the line, looked at her son, and said, "Lord, what am I going to feed you?" Shaq grinned, but the marks kept coming. By 9, he was the height of most 6th graders. By 10, he was looking some grown men in the eye. His shoes wore out from the inside before they wore out from the outside. Lucille bought them a size too big and stuffed the toes with newspaper until his feet caught up, which they always did quickly, as if his body had somewhere urgent to be. The apartment on Bergen Street was small. It had always been small, but with Shaq in it, it felt like a ship being outgrown by the sea inside it. He learned to move carefully, to turn sideways in the hallway, to sit at the kitchen table at an angle, to duck slightly, not from any doorframe, not yet, but from the overhead light in the bathroom that hung on a cord and swung when you bumped it, which he did every single morning without fail, and every single morning Lucille would hear the thunk from the kitchen and say nothing because some things you simply accept. None of this was the hard part. The hard part was school. Chancellor Avenue School had 340 students, 3 floors, 1 functioning water fountain per floor, and a vice principal named Mr. Raymond Okafor, who had been at the school so long that parents who had attended as children were now sending their own children to him for the same lectures about responsibility and self-respect that he had been giving since 1971. Mr. Okafor was a tall man, 6 feet 2 inches, which made him, until Shaq arrived, the tallest person in the building. He took a specific interest in Shaq, not because of the height, though that was hard to ignore, because of what he saw underneath it. He saw a boy who was trying very hard to seem like he didn't care about anything, which in Mr. Okafor's long experience meant a boy who cared about absolutely everything. He pulled Shaq aside one afternoon in the 4th grade, after a classroom incident involving a broken chair, not broken by Shaq on purpose, broken by Shaq simply sitting in it, which was somehow worse, and said something Shaq remembered for the rest of his life. You are going to spend your whole life being the biggest person in every room, Mr. Okafor said. You can let that make you small on the inside. Or you can decide it means something. But you have to decide. Nobody decides that for you. Shaq was 9 years old. He did not fully understand it yet, but he remembered it. The 2 years between meeting Valeria and leaving Newark were the best 2 years of Shaq's childhood. Not because anything dramatic happened. Not because there were parades or championships or moments that looked important from the outside. They were the best 2 years because of the ordinary things inside them. Walking to school in the morning, cutting through the alley behind the bodega to save 3 minutes. Sitting on Miss Dottie's fire escape in the summer, eating watermelon and spitting seeds down at the sidewalk, and pretending to be surprised when Miss Dottie yelled at them from inside. Playing on the blacktop until the streetlights came on. That universal childhood timer, respected in every city in America. And then 5 minutes after, and then 10, until one of their mothers called their name in that specific tone that meant the next call would have consequences. Valeria was the first person outside his family who treated Shaq's size as completely unremarkable. She did not stare, she did not make jokes. She did not use him as a human step stool to reach things, which was something the other kids had discovered early and done constantly. She simply talked to him. She argued with him about things that mattered. Who was the better player on the playground, whether the school lunch pizza, actually pizza, or a different substance entirely? Whether Miss Dottie's sweet potato pie was better than Lucille's cornbread. A debate with no right answer, and therefore no end. She read constantly. Books from the school library, books from the public library on Washington Street, books her grandmother pulled from a cardboard box in the closet that smelled like the 1950s. She did not perform reading the way some kids do, making sure people noticed the big book and the serious face. She just read. Because she wanted to know things, she lent Shaq a book once. A biography of Jim Thorpe, the Native American athlete who won 2 gold medals at the 1912 Olympics and was later told to give them back, and did, and then had them returned to his family decades after he died. Shaq read it in 3 days, which was faster than he had read anything before or since. "Why did you give me this one?" he asked. "Because he was the best," she said. And people still tried to take it from him, and he kept going anyway. She was 10 years old when she said this. Shaq thought about Jim Thorpe on the blacktop for the rest of that summer. The news came in February of 1982. Shaq was 10 years old. It was a Tuesday. He remembered the day specifically because it was the day after he had made his first actual move on the blacktop. A real one, not an accident. A spin move past Marcus Webb that had made Darnell Price say, "Oh," out loud, involuntarily, which was the highest possible compliment available on that court. He came home from school, feeling like something good was beginning. His stepfather, Sergeant Philip Harrison, was sitting at the kitchen table in his uniform. Lucille was at the stove with her back turned in the specific way she stood at the stove when she was thinking hard about something that had nothing to do with cooking. Shaq knew before anyone spoke. He had learned to read rooms, moving families do. "We got orders," Sergeant Harrison said. He said it straight, the way soldiers say things. Not cruel, just direct. "We're being transferred. We leave in 6 weeks." "Where?" Shaq asked. "A pause Germany," his stepfather said. Shaq sat down in the kitchen chair. It held Germany. He had learned about Germany in school. He had seen it on a map. It was not close to Newark, New Jersey. It was not close to Bergen Street or Chancellor Avenue School or the Blacktop with the bent hoop or Avon Avenue or Miss Dottie's fire escape tomatoes. It was not close to Valeria. 6 weeks, he repeated. 6 weeks, Sergeant Harrison confirmed. Lucille still hadn't turned around from the stove. Shaq went to his room and sat on his bed and looked at the picture of the basketball player on the wall. The one mid-air, the ball leaving his fingertips. He looked at it for a long time. He told Valeria the next day at school. He did not know how to say it, so he said it plainly, the way she always said things. "We're moving. Germany. 6 weeks." She looked at him. Her face did several things in quick order. Something quick and sharp crossed it first, like a flinch. Then it settled back into stillness the way her face always settled, the way Miss Dottie's face did. Generations of women in that family who processed things quietly and kept them in. "Germany like Europe, Germany," she said. "Yeah." She looked at her desk. "Okay," she said. "Not okay, that's fine. Not okay, it doesn't matter. Just okay. The kind that means, I heard you. I'm putting this somewhere. I'll deal with it later." She did not bring it up again for 5 weeks. Then on the last day, a Friday afternoon in early April, the weather just starting to turn, the first almost warm day after a long winter. She came running down Bergen Street as the Harrison family loaded the last bags into the car. She was out of breath. She had her red coat on, even though it was almost warm enough not to need it. She stopped in front of Shaq on the sidewalk. They looked at each other. What do you say at 10 years old when the right words haven't been invented yet? Adults have language for leaving. Children have only the feeling of it, big and shapeless, sitting in the chest where the right words should be. She held out a notebook, small brown paper cover. His name written on the front in pencil, each letter careful and slightly too large. Shaquille. He took it. He put it in the bag without looking inside. If he looked inside, he would not be able to do the thing he was about to have to do, which was get in the car. She stood on the sidewalk. He got in the car. He turned and watched through the back window as Bergen Street went past. The bodega, the chain-link fence, the cracked sidewalk squares. Valeria in the red coat getting smaller and smaller until the car turned the corner and she was gone. He pressed his hand flat against the cold window glass for a moment. Then he faced forward. Germany was a shock in the specific way that only a child from Newark can be shocked by Bavaria. Everything was different. The colors were different. Buildings in shades of cream and orange and dark wood. Nothing like the brick and concrete Shaq had grown up inside. The language was different, obviously, and Shaq sat in his new school on Baumholder Army Base, surrounded by the sound of German, and felt for the first time in his life genuinely invisible, not because he was small, which he was not, but because nobody here had any category for him at all. He was a 7-foot-tall black kid from Newark in a Bavarian classroom. He ate lunch alone for the first 2 weeks. Then basketball found him again. There was a gym on the base. A real gym. Polished floor, glass backboards, nets that were actually attached. Shaq walked in one afternoon, just to walk in somewhere warm, and a man in a Louisiana State University sweatshirt watched him from across the gym for about 30 seconds, and then walked over. The man's name was Dale Brown. Coach Dale Brown, who would go on to coach Shaq at LSU, was visiting the military base for a coaching clinic. He was 47 years old. He had been coaching college basketball for 15 years. He had seen a lot of players. He had not seen this. He asked Shaq his name, asked his age, asked what grade he was in. Shaq told him, 13 years old, 8th grade. Brown was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "How long have you been playing?" "Since I was little," Shaq said. Brown looked at him, all of him, from the floor up. "Son," he said, "you have never been little." It was the first time Shaq had laughed in Germany. Brown spent an hour with him that afternoon. Just basics, footwork, positioning, how to use the body he had been given as an asset instead of an obstacle. He did not treat Shaq as a curiosity or a project. He treated him like a player. When the hour was done, Brown told him, "If you keep working, you're going to play college ball. Maybe more, don't waste this." Then he left. Shaq walked back to the barracks in the cold Bavarian evening, and he thought about Mr. Okafor at Chancellor Avenue School, and what he had said about deciding what your size meant. He thought maybe he was starting to understand it. The next few years moved the way Army years move, in short, packed chapters, each one ending with a move and beginning with a new school, new base, new set of kids to figure out, new coaches to impress, new hallways to fill. Fort Sam Houston, Texas. Then back to Germany briefly. Then San Antonio permanently. Cole High School, a small private school with 1,500 students and a basketball team that had never seen anything walk through their gym doors that looked remotely like Shaquille O'Neal. Coach Dave Madura at Cole was a practical man. He did not get philosophical about talent. He saw Shaq in that first tryout, 6 feet 10 inches, 15 years old, moving with that large body grace that had been growing quietly since the Bergen Street blacktop, and he said simply, "Can you show up at 6 a.m.? Shaq showed up at 6 a.m. every day for the next 3 years. They won the Texas State Championship in 1989. Shaq was the story. Everyone knew it, the recruiters knew it, the newspapers knew it. But in the locker room after the game, with his teammates screaming around him, and Coach Madura quietly wiping his eyes in the corner, Shaq sat on the bench and felt something odd. He wanted to tell someone. Not his teammates. Not the reporters waiting outside. He wanted to tell the specific person he always wanted to tell things to. The person whose face he saw first when something good happened, the way you see a face before you remember why. He reached into his bag. He pulled out the notebook. He had carried it through Germany and Georgia and San Antonio. It had moved with every move, buried in whatever bag held the things he could not leave behind. The brown paper cover was softer now, handled. His name in pencil on the front, faded but still readable. He opened it, looked at the first page. Then he closed it. He was not ready yet. He did not know why exactly. Only that opening it fully felt like something that required the right moment. And a state championship locker room with boys screaming around him was not it. He put it back in his bag. He went out to talk to the reporters. He smiled the smile they wanted. But something small and private stayed with him all night. Something from Bergen Street. Something in a red coat. Something that had told him, a long time ago, in a voice that didn't ask permission. He's still better than all y'all put together. He still heard it. Clearly, after all these years, he still believed it. The night of June 24, 1992, the Orlando Magic selected Shaquille O'Neal with the first overall pick in the NBA draft. The room exploded. His mother cried. Sergeant Harrison, a man who had shown emotion approximately 4 times in Shaq's memory, gripped his son's shoulder so hard it would have hurt anyone else. Shaq stood up in his suit, a large suit, custom-made because nothing off the rack worked, and hugged his mother for a long time, his enormous arms wrapping around her completely, her face disappearing into his chest. He was 20 years old. He was about to become one of the most famous athletes on the planet. The cameras loved every second of it. Later that night, in the hotel room, after the calls and the celebrations, and the noise had finally settled into something quieter, Shaq sat on the edge of the bed in the dark. He reached into his bag. He took out the notebook. He held it in his hands. The brown paper cover, softer now than ever, the pencil letters on the front barely visible but still there. Shaquille. He thought about calling information. Newark, New Jersey, Simmons, Avon Avenue. It was 1992. You could still do that. You could still dial a number and ask a stranger to connect you to someone's grandmother. He picked up the hotel phone. He held it. He put it back down. What would he say? Hi, this is Shaquille O'Neal. I was just the first pick in the NBA draft. I don't know if you remember me. We were friends when we were 10, on a blacktop. You gave me a notebook and I never read it all the way through. He lay back on the bed with the notebook on his chest. He fell asleep like that. He did not make the call. The years that followed were enormous in every sense of the word. Orlando. Then Los Angeles. Then the Lakers and Kobe Bryant and Phil Jackson, and 3 NBA championships back-to-back-to-back in 2000, 2001, and 2002. Then Miami and Dwayne Wade and a 4th championship in 2006. Then Phoenix, Cleveland, Boston, the end of the playing years, the slow, graceful wind down of a career that had been so large it was genuinely difficult to measure. Shaq became Shaq, not just a basketball player, a character, a brand. A personality so outsized and warm and deliberately funny that people forgot, sometimes, that underneath all of it was a human being who had grown up in a small apartment on Bergen Street with a radiator that knocked at 11 o'clock. The commercials came. The movies came, Blue Chips, Kazam, Steel, movies that critics destroyed and audiences watched anyway because Shaq on screen was simply hard to look away from. The rap albums came, which his critics loved to mock and his fans loved to defend, and Shaq himself laughed about with the specific confidence of a man who understood that not everything has to be serious to matter. Inside the NBA on TNT came, and with it a new kind of fame, the warm, living room kind, where people felt like they knew him, like he was someone their family had always had around. He got his doctorate in education from Barry University in 2012. When the news broke, the jokes came fast on the internet. People found it hilarious, inexplicable, delightful. Shaq let them laugh. His mother had told him to finish what he started. He had started a degree. He finished it. That was the whole story. He started businesses. He invested carefully and sometimes brilliantly. He gave money away, quietly, more than people knew, more than he talked about. The Shaquille O'Neal Foundation ran programs for children in underserved communities, paid for things that grant funding didn't cover, filled gaps that systems left open. He was, by any external measure, a man who had built a remarkable life. And he knew he was. But there is a particular kind of unfinished business that follows certain people through remarkable lives, quiet and patient, never loud enough to interrupt the noise of success, but always present. In the back of the car on the New Jersey Turnpike, in the hotel room after the championship, in the odd, still moments between one big thing and the next. For Shaq, that unfinished business had a first name and a last name. And for 30 years, he had been not quite ready to do anything about it. The closest he ever came, before 2024, was in the winter of 2003. The Lakers were playing the New Jersey Nets at Continental Airlines Arena in East Rutherford. Close enough to Newark. that on a clear night you could theoretically see the city lights from the arena parking lot. Shaq was in the back of the team bus coming off the Garden State Parkway when the Newark exit started appearing on the overhead signs. Exit 14, Newark. He watched the sign pass, then the next one. Then the city skyline, small from the highway, gray and dense and specific, looking exactly like itself and nothing else. He pressed 2 fingers to the cold bus window. He had not done that since he was 10 years old in a car moving away from Bergen Street. His teammate at the time, a quiet veteran named Derek Fisher, noticed. "You know somebody in Newark?" Fisher asked. Shaq was quiet for a moment. "Used to," he said. Fisher nodded and didn't push. He was that kind of teammate. The bus moved on. The skyline shrank. The Nets game came and went. The Lakers won. Shaq had 28 points and 11 rebounds. The reporters asked their questions and he answered them with the big smile. And then they flew back to Los Angeles, and the season kept moving, and Newark receded back to where it always waited. In the background, patient. What changed in 2024 was small, as the things that change large decisions usually are. It was October 2023. Shaq was in a hotel room in Atlanta after a taping of Inside the NBA, eating room service at midnight, because that is what you do when you have been on television for 4 hours, and your body still thinks it's game time. He was scrolling on his phone, half watching, half reading, the way everyone does at midnight, when he came across a video. A teacher. Elementary school, somewhere in New Jersey by the look of the classroom decorations. A Rutgers pennant. A giant schedule on the wall. The teacher was a woman, maybe 50, sitting at a small table working with a boy who clearly could not get something. The boy was frustrated. His shoulders were up around his ears. He was making the face children make when they feel stupid and are terrified of feeling stupid. The teacher did not hurry him. She did not raise her voice or lower it into that particular patient but strained register that some teachers use when patience is running out. She just stayed there, steady, and said something quiet that the video didn't pick up, and the boy's shoulders came down a fraction, and he tried again. The video was 18 seconds long. Shaq watched it 4 times. The 4th time he watched it, he thought about Valeria Simmons on a blacktop in 1981, telling a boy who had missed 3 shots that he was still better than all of them put together. He put the phone down. He stared at the ceiling of the Atlanta hotel room. Then he picked up the phone and called Marcus Bell. Marcus Bell had been Shaq's chief business associate and one of his closest friends for 15 years. He was a precise, methodical man, the kind who wrote things down and followed up on them and remembered details that other people let slip. He answered on the 2nd ring, even though it was past midnight, because that was the kind of man he was. "You need something," Marcus said. "Not a question. I need to find somebody," Shaq said. A brief pause. "Who?" "Her name is Valeria Simmons. She grew up in Newark, Avon Avenue. I knew her when I was 9-10 years old. Her grandmother was called Miss Dottie, Dorothy Simmons." Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing. "How long ago are we talking?" "I last saw her in 1982. Another pause. "Longer." "Okay. I need you to be quiet about it," Shaq said. "No press, nothing public. I just need to know if she's out there and if she's okay." "I understand," Marcus said. He understood because in 15 years he had learned to hear the difference between the things Shaq said casually and the things Shaq said carefully. This was said carefully. This was something that mattered in a register, that had nothing to do with business or basketball or brand. "I'll start in the morning."